Hi, I'm Jason Turse. I lead technical business development for Akamai's public sector growth team.
And hi, I'm Mike Colson, Director of Public Sector Growth at Akamai.
So good morning, Mike. Welcome to RSA.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's going to be a great show. This is your first time at RSA, right?
This is my first time at RSA, so I'm looking forward to talking about public sector compliance and security. But with that in mind, it's an increasingly complex landscape out there.
It is.
We have FedRAMP, we have CMMC, we have Department of War's various impact levels. Most agencies and organizations getting on board with formalized risk management framework. So with this in mind, where do most organizations get stuck?
Yeah, I think typically what we're seeing is folks think that just because a company has a FedRAMP approval or authority to operate, that it means that they're ready to go and they don't have any additional work to do. But FedRAMP is really a framework that allows for NIST standards to be applied and those controls to be met through a series of artifacts. It still operates under a shared security model where companies like Akamai will have met the FedRAMP controls that are applicable, but it's up to an agency and their authorizing official and their CISOs and their cybersecurity team to assess whether or not the controls are applied in the same way that they need them to be, as well as to understand how within that shared security model they have responsibilities in order to ensure full compliance and then do their own ATO, because they're going to need an authority to operate within their agency. And so when you get a provisional ATO as a company like Akamai, which we have with FedRAMP Moderate, we're looking to obtain our FedRAMP High and DoD CCSRG Impact Level 4 and 5 authorizations, it's still incumbent on the government to do that next step. And I think that's something that has been tough. And we've been doing this now for, a couple of decades in the space. You and I have been around. And it's still an educating process, especially with all of the new folks coming into the government space. But Akamai is here to help, and we're really excited to lean in and help not just educate, but show the artifacts of what we've done.
I think that speaks a lot to my experience as well. So I think it's fair to say your opinion is it's a framework. It's not the final solution for all things authorization. Certainly I've seen it misused, typically by organizations that are looking for an easy button. And while there are solutions that provide kind of a better way forward, it continues to be a bit of a misperception. With that, is there one kind of specific, misconception or misperception by government agencies about, how we support compliance?
I think what we've come to realize is that the way that we operate our global environment has a series of rule sets that apply to each of these different compliance regimes. And so it's really important that the customers interoperate with or engage with their account teams and with their technical specialists for Akamai to understand where the limitations are, how we draw the specific custom map boundaries or compliance boundaries, because not everything ends up in framework, right? As you know, like features and function parity isn't 100%. We're working towards it. But it's important for the folks in compliance to take a look, understand really what your east, west, north, south bounds are so that you can apply the appropriate security protocols and get the most efficiency and best use out of the Akamai platform.
I would probably actually flip that as well, that there's an opportunity for many customers to better understand how Akamai capabilities support things like sovereignty. You and I have been in a number of EU-related conversations in the last few weeks. We actually have features and capabilities that provide that. Similarly with FedRAMP, it's not just FedRAMP. It's additional controls and solutions, typically around global flows, because we're a global infrastructure provider.
Yeah.
They're pretty material. So, complex environment out there. I think you just said we're here to help. We have account teams. We have solutions architects that are trained in this area. We have solutions for it. So with that, I'll give you an even harder question, but one that I know that you love. So the U.S. government is on the trail to zero trust. And with that, the government's zero trust mandates, OMB M2209, systems maturity model, the Department of War's pillar model, of these, where do you see gaps today? And how does Akamai help address that through what I've heard you refer to as least permissive trust?
Yeah, no, this is a question that's near and dear to my heart. So first, I appreciate that zero trust is something that everyone's trying to achieve. I think the reality, though, is it's a misnomer, because in any architecture that you design, there's an inherence of trust that has to happen, because you either have to trust that that user is going to come in and access the data or not, and then they can't get their job done. And so I think CISA did a really good job of trying to identify that through pillars. But what ended up happening is what happens in any of these frameworks. You've created a series of silos, and you have IT silos within identity, network, data, et cetera, that now you maybe have implemented that technology, but you haven't applied it ubiquitously across your environment. Or you've gone out and said, hey, I'm just going to establish an SSL VPN through a zero trust vendor. And once they're in, through that boundary, they're secure into the environment. Akamai takes a much different approach to this. Because of the global footprint and the way that we're architected, and the way that we are able to introduce not just the access control piece, but the way that we look at device security posture, the way that we are able to look at identity and access management and at a very granular attribute level, the way that we're able to manage that network aspect and provide north, south, east, west security firewalls and microsegmentation, we are able to do something that's really unique in this space. And it's create a least permissive architecture that really provides not just a barrier and a defense in depth perspective of I'm going to set my gates, guns, and guards to the exterior and then control access in, but I'm going to assign a guard and look at not just the way that the user is coming in, but are they coming in at the right time of day? What is the network posture? Is it the right persona that's being used? Is the user accessing this from two different locations geographically at the same time? And we're able to assign a guard to that user at a very transactional level, and every transaction validate least permissive access controls all the way down to the specific data that they're getting into. And I think as we look past, right, the design of what zero trust was laid out to do into what it really needs to do, I think least permissive is a better, again, more ubiquitous approach, because from a platform perspective, Akamai doesn't have every answer, but we fit a large number of the bill for what needs to be done to provide true least permissive. And that's how we're going to be able to secure our nation's most important assets and workloads.
What I think I'm hearing you say also is a classical kind of enterprise architecture argument, right? So you're an architect for a long time.
Yeah.
I played that role as well. We often think in terms of architecture of defining the fit functions, defining access, defining what's not accessed. And so least permissive is almost a North Star for let's begin with that fitness function. What is it that we're protecting? And then fan out from there. So nothing inherently wrong with pillars. They describe the environment. But from an architect's lens, using least permissive allows you to start with an objective and the fitness function for that architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. And it's really about where we're trying to go and meeting the business policy and the business rules versus, a checkbox for compliance.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Checkbox for compliance is something that we hear a lot. So let me flip it around and ask you a question for a change. So, CISOs and federal agencies are sitting and listening to this recording today. They probably have a FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP high authorization in hand. They know what the security should look like, but their posture doesn't match the paperwork.
Yep.
So what's the first concrete step they can take to move away from checkbox compliance to real security?
Yeah, well, there's multiple steps to take. First of all, CISOs have a hard job, so if you're watching this, shout out to you. Very difficult job. Most of this tends to boil down to onlooker like CISOs are responsible for compliance. In reality, CISOs are responsible for risk management. They're responsible for creating outcomes for an organization, whether that's a federal organization, a state, public sector type of partner organization. And so aligning security outcomes to the outcomes of the organization, as cliche as that sounds, documenting that and really understanding how that traces to investment is really kind of the first function of a CISO. So that's communicating to other stakeholders in the organization the value of security, whether that's in order to enable, say, things that are more value added or considered more value added, like AI adoption, because then again, you have least permissive challenges that you have to account for. The second piece is actually understanding you're kind of postulating this as a given that what we have in terms of compliance doesn't match what's on the ground. Well, is that actually documented? And what is that gap? And how do I invest in closing that gap? So again, kind of cliche to look at a gap analysis like that, but I think that's pretty critical for CISOs to do, because oftentimes I see, well, you guys have given me, whether a cloud service provider, or something like Akamai, which is kind of more than just cloud services, or another provider, understanding the difference between what you have inherited from those providers and what your actual posture will allow you to focus and prioritize those investments. So I think those two functions speak to each other pretty well. What outcomes are you trying to drive for the organization? And then how do you map your investment strategy accordingly? I think those are two kind of higher level functions of CISOs that often end up behind putting out the fires, the incident response and the compliance, but those are absolutely core to being effective.
So you kind of like alluded to this, but we're seeing through Department of War's programs like SWIFT, and we're seeing it in other places, this idea of continuous authorization. So what is Akamai doing to help customers in this space?
Great question. We have a number of solutions in this space, but holistically, first of all, we have a defense-focused team. So to one of your earlier comments, we have solutions architects and account teams positioned to be more constructive than just, hey, we have a product. But we do have products in the space, and our products that are effective are using real-time intelligence, awareness of Akamai's greater kind of understanding of internet attack in order to drive things like microsegmentation, enterprise access, and even visibility on the threats, which we implement through firewall policies and some of the product designs and choices. For those internal Akamai, we understand this, but many others don't realize that Akamai, observes about 25% of the legitimate internet traffic on a daily basis, which gives us a distinct advantage, or at least informs a lot of the potential product choices that we're making with respect to threats. And I think that's key to what Akamai brings to the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was a great conversation, and I really appreciate your time today and anyone who's out there watching. So thank you for being part of it, and we hope you've all taken something positive away.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to my first RSA, so thank you very much, and away we go to the conference, I guess.
Yeah.